There's a tiny part of me that's kind of disappointed that Kansas went 9-4 last year. Part of the excitement surrounding Lance Leipold and his arrival in Kansas is the fact that Kansas was struggling to win football games. And the journey of getting to that point was honestly more exciting than the result of finishing 9-4. That being said, they face a new challenge in a new look conference, as well as new expectations for this program, expectations that we hadn't seen in quite some time. And now they're ready for that new challenge. We take a deep dive into the Kansas Jayhawks and see what should we expect from this team in 2024. Before we do that, though, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, share the video. It goes a long way in helping the channel as well as this deep dive series. It's been a really fun series so far, and it's not possible without all of you. So let's keep that going with the Kansas Jayhawks. Lance Leipold, we obviously knew that the success was coming. We knew what to expect from him. It was just a matter of time. And so far, we have been not disappointed at all. He has done a great job of bringing this team to new heights. And we haven't seen that kind of success in a while. This is a group that when you look at when he took over, he starts at 2-10, then he goes 6-7. You already saw the success in 2 years. You knew that he was going to find the right pieces. And this is someone who, when you look at his time at Whitewater and at Buffalo, he found the right players to make a good culture and find a winning formula. And he has done that once again at Kansas. So it's not really a surprise that it took him very little time to win football games. But now you kind of lose the surprise factor. This is a team that is going to have to put some things together on both sides of the football, and you're going through some changes, but you're also pretty excited about what you're capable of doing under Lance Leipold in 2024. And it's going to be fun to see what they do as kind of a repeat of last year, if you can repeat. I don't know if they have another 9-win season in them right now, but that being said, I think that you have to at least give Lance Leipold the benefit of the doubt when it comes to giving this team the right pieces in place and putting them in a position to win football games. When you look at what they've done in the transfer portal, it's again the right guys coming in. You maybe don't have some of the biggest names coming in, but you also brought in some pieces that you needed to upgrade. You bring a guy in like Bryce Foster to help on the offensive line. When you have to replace so many veteran players, certain guys like Mike Nowitzki are going to be tough to replace. So bringing a guy like Bryce Foster from the SEC feels like a solid addition. You also bring in Daryl Simmons Jr. from Iowa State to help on the offensive line. That was clearly something they felt they needed, and they went out and got guys. They also bring Shane Bumgarner to help in the offensive line. So that was clearly an issue that they felt they needed to address. And so they bring in those three guys, bringing in Amir Herring from Michigan. You bring in talent to be able to handle that transition. You also bring on the defensive side of the ball, you bring in Devin Dye. That's kind of an underrated addition coming from Utah State. You also bring kind of a forgotten player in Deshaun Hanukkah at tight end from Iowa State. So you have guys that are going to fly under the radar, which is exactly what Kansas wants. And you're going to have to see if they can insert themselves into that group and find ways to compete right away. Now, the departing talent from the transfer portal isn't as concerning as you might think. There's certain players that you maybe are disappointed that are gone. Armaj Reed Adams departing to Texas A&M was probably disappointing. Gage Keys leaving, at one point probably would have been a little disappointing 2 years ago, but you didn't lose a lot of guys the last couple of years where you felt, okay, they're impossible to replace. But Reed Adams this year, and I think that Gage Keys is someone who could be tough to replace. But again, I feel pretty good if you're a Kansas fan about where you're at and where you need to be. And you trust your coaching staff has done a good enough job replacing that talent. And when you look at what we have at the depth chart, you feel pretty good about where this team is going. Now, Jeff Grimes takes over an offense that was very good under Andy Koldenicki. So you have to feel that he has a certain level that he needs to hit if you're going to be successful in 2024. Now, obviously, everyone is talking about Jalen Daniels, and for good reason. Jalen Daniels is one of the most explosive quarterbacks in college football. The problem is that he can't stay healthy sometimes. You need to be able to work with that strength and conditioning staff to find a way to keep him on the field. And you need to figure out how are we going to put ourselves in a good position to win football games. A big part of that is keeping six healthy, finding ways to keep him on the field. Now, part of that is going to be maybe you limit how much he runs or how many design runs you have. I don't know what the answer is other than, the off-season conditioning and what he's capable of doing. You don't have Jason Bean to back him up, so you don't have that explosive option behind him. But you do have Cole Ballard, who got a little bit of time last year, threw for 286 yards, threw one touchdown to three picks. So you don't really know what you have behind Jalen Daniels. So part of Jalen Daniels staying healthy means that you get to let these young guys learn behind them. And I've seen that more and more now this year in college football is that you have this experienced guy and then you have a brand new person or a very young, inexperienced person behind them. So that's kind of the dilemma if you're Kansas right now. But you also like what your ceiling looks like if Jalen Daniels stays healthy and can also get back to his peak form. If he's able to do that, you're feeling pretty good about where this team is headed and what they're capable of doing. Next to him is really where things are going to be really exciting because Jalen Daniels, part of, like I said, part of limiting his hits that he takes is going to be handing off the football. And when you have the duo that they have returning, why wouldn't you hand off the football? Devin Neal is one of the best running backs in college football. I don't think enough people are talking about him and what he's capable of doing. He's an explosive weapon that is a perfect complement to Jalen Daniels. This has been a duo that's been fun to watch. They are back for one final year with the Jayhawks, and they're going to be a very explosive group. It's just not going to be about that, though. It's going to be helping keep Jalen Daniels on the field and giving Devin Neal the opportunities that he is capable of doing. And what we saw last year, when you're looking at Devin Neal, he rushed for over 100 yards in 6 games last year, ran for 1,280 yards and 16 touchdowns. So he is someone who has the talent to be a force. And if Jalen Daniels needs a breather, if they need time, Devin Neal is someone you can give the ball to, and he's going to do a lot of good things. Now, the surprise of this group was getting Daniel Highshaw to stay. That was probably the biggest surprise for Kansas because he could have gone to a lot of schools and been the top option, but he chose to stay with the Jayhawks and be part of a rotation that's going to feature Devin Neal more than they're going to feature him. Daniel Highshaw is going to get his opportunities, but Devin Neal is the undisputed RB1. He is going to be the guy. So the fact that he stayed says a lot about what he believes in this program. He's bought into what this program is selling, and it's going to be a very fun group. This is a group that finished ninth in rushing, average over 206 yards per game on the ground. And that's going to be something that stays the same under Jeff Grimes. They are going to try to run the football as much as possible. And Neal and Highshire are going to be the two big pieces that run the show. Obviously, Jalen Daniels will play part of that, but they'd like to see him probably run last, like I said, because of the talent behind him and because of his health concerns. But they're still going to be really fun to watch. Now, the passing attack, that is really where things are going to be fun. I think that if Jalen Daniels can, like I said, stay healthy and build that confidence back up, this passing attack has a ton of potential because you have lots of options to hit downfield. When you look at what this group has, you're looking at three of the most underrated wide receivers you will talk about in college football. Lawrence Arnold, Quentin Skinner, and Luke Grimm are all back after solid seasons for the Jayhawks in 2023. This is a group that has big playability. Grimm and Arnold are the more productive of the three, but Quentin Skinner is that big player that can have a huge impact on this team. This is a guy who averaged 20.2 yards per catch, and he is someone who is a deep threat waiting to happen. Now, Grimm and Arnold are going to be those guys like we've seen in the past that have stepped up in a big way. They've been a little bit more consistent, and they are guys that Daniels has been able to find downfield. But Skinner is going to be that guy that is so dangerous to stop downfield. And teams definitely have to pay attention to all three of them, which opens things up for all of them. Because if you're worried about one of the other guys is going to step up and probably hurt you more than you think you're ready for. So you have to game plan for all three. You also have a guy in Trevor Wilson who is back. That is a solid, underrated player that people probably aren't talking about nearly enough. And then when you go to the tight end position, Jared Casey somehow still has college eligibility, which is crazy. More of a blocker more than anything, but still someone who is capable of catching footballs at the tight end position. We talked about Deshaun Hanukkah coming in from Iowa State. You also have Trevor Cardell, who is going to be solid, has 262 yards in the last 3 seasons for the Jayhawks. So you have options for this group. And that's what makes then priority one is keeping Jalen Daniels healthy. I've said that so many times already in this video, but you have ways to keep him healthy, limiting the number of hits that he takes, getting the football to playmakers, handing the ball off to running backs. There are a lot of different ways that you can keep him healthy, and it should be relatively easy to keep him on the field. He is your biggest asset because if you don't have him on the field, you take away a lot of things. Cole Ballard may very well be the future of this program at quarterback. He may very well be what they need. But right now, they need Jalen Daniels to stay healthy. He brings a running dynamic that none of these other quarterbacks have right now. And he is the veteran that knows what this offense wants to do. Obviously, learning a new system will be a challenge, but you have the right personnel in place to make things happen. The offensive line obviously plays a huge role in that as well. So they are going to have to keep their quarterback upright. And they'll have some guys coming back that'll be really fun to watch. And like I said, they play a big role in how healthy Jalen Daniels will stay all year. The center position, like we mentioned before, Shane Bumgarner comes in from Tiffin, and he'll be someone that is looking to take over for Nowitzki. That is a huge challenge to be able to take over for someone that has been so experienced at Buffalo and at Kansas and so important for Lance Leipold and his teams. That's going to be tough, but Bumgarner shouldn't try to be Nowitzki. He should try to be himself, and that's going to get him pretty far. The guard positions are going to be interesting. I think that there's a little bit less experience, although Michael Ford is back. He has plenty of experience there, but Nolan Gorska is going to be a player to watch as someone who has a very little experience, but someone who could take a step forward. Daryl Simmons will also play a role in that as well. Then you look at Bryce Cabeldou. He is someone who is taking on more of a new role last year, had 11 starts last year at right tackle, and he'll be fun to watch. Amir Herring, we talked about him earlier. He'll be part of that as well. I think that you look at what this team is capable of doing. I think that Logan Brown is going to be another guy to watch, former 5-star, former Wisconsin player. He'll be someone that you have to keep an eye on. And then we talked about Bryce Foster before. We will see where this group uses him. We'll see where he's going to be utilized. I think that he is someone who maybe Texas A&M fans weren't exactly excited about in 2023, but he could be someone that is going to take on a new role and be able to maybe play a bigger role for Kansas, just kind of like he did at Texas A&M. So we'll see what happens there. But the offensive line is going through a little bit of a transition. Again, you lose Nowitzki, you lose Reed Adams. Those are going to be guys that you need to replace, but you have talent coming back that can make life very easy for you and also plays a huge role in what your quarterback can do as well as the other skill positions. And that's going to be interesting to watch. The defense has to take a step forward. I don't care what happens with the offense. The defense must play better. And it feels like the back end should be pretty solid, but the front group is where things really need to see them hit their stride. So Brian Borland has some work to do to get that group up to speed and make them into what has to be a tough group that can produce stops on a frequent basis. Kareem Robinson comes back at the defensive end position. He'll be joined by Dean Miller. You have pretty good size for both of them. Robinson comes in at 6'3", 260. Dean Miller's at 6'5", 230. So you have guys that have the right frame to play those positions, but you have various levels of experience. Miller is relatively inexperienced, only has 16 games of experience with 4 tackles over the last 2 years. Robinson has obviously way more experience than him, so he will be leaned upon probably early on to make sure that these guys are playing at a high level. So that's going to be interesting to watch. Again, this is a group that has the ability to be disruptive. You just have to find the right pieces in place. DJ Withers is going to play one of the defensive tackle positions, and Tommy Dunn is going to play the other one. Those are guys who, again, when you talk about experience, this is a group that does not have a ton of it, but you have lots of potential. I think that Keenan Caldwell could also play a role at that position as well. Same with Caleb Taylor. So you have some upperclassmen that have been here for a while that know what they need to do to compete. But again, the defensive line is going to play a huge role in this defense. And you had to replace some key starters, and you have a couple of guys coming back, but you also have, for the most part, new faces that are going to be taking over for that group. And that's going to be really tough. I think that's going to be a big factor in what this team can do in terms of we talk about getting after the quarterback, getting to the ball carrier, penetration into the backfield. The defensive line is where things all start. They set the tone up front. And if they're able to do that, you feel pretty good. But if they're not, it could be a long year for the Jayhawks. But you have to trust what Leipold's done. You have to trust that they brought in the right talent and that this group is bought in. That is the one thing that you just can't really measure is the level in which these guys are bought in because it feels like they feel good on the back end, but you don't really know what you have up front. And that's going to take some time to figure out. And I think that when you look at the schedule, it does give them some time to sort things out up front and figure out who is actually the starter, who can step up and play big when they need them to. But also, you need to figure that out relatively quickly because there's not a ton of time before the Big 12 season starts. And that will require you to play at your best with some of these teams that they'll face. And if you want to make a run in the Big 12 this year, you have to make sure that the defensive line is going to be disruptive. The linebacker position probably the same could be said for them. And this is an interesting duo or even trio, if you will, that it depends on what look they're going to go for, but this is a group that has the ability to make some big plays, and it'll be really fun to see how they step up to the challenge. Again, the defensive line is going to play a big role in that, but you get a guy like JB Brown from Bowling Green, someone who was productive with the Falcons and had 57 tackles, 6 tackles for loss. I think that he was a really interesting player when they got him, and now he is coming back after what has been a group that has been really fun to watch. The linebacker position is going to be interesting to pay attention to because, like we said, when you look at what needs to happen, the defensive line plays a big role. And like I said before, yes, they are going to dictate a lot, but guys like JB Brown, who, like I said, started at Bowling Green last year, comes into Kansas and is able to play a bigger role. That's huge to have an experienced player like Brown back in 2024. So when you look at who joins him, Cornell Wheeler, the senior, is coming back, and he has less experience, obviously, than Brown does, but you get an opportunity to showcase what you can do. Maybe a guy like Taiwan Berryhill is going to play a role as well. So we'll see. There's plenty of competition. That's one of the things that you like about a Lance Leipold run program. You're going to have plenty of competition to compete right off the bat. Tristan Fletcher could play a role as well. 6 feet, 225 pounds there. Dylan Downing is another one who is going to be a guy to keep an eye on. Again, they have plenty of options. at the linebacker position. At the hawk position, I always love these hybrid roles that everyone has on their team because everybody has one, and Kansas is no different. Jason Gilliam is going to play a role in that as well. He's going to be that hybrid role, if you will, 6'2", 220 pounds, had 37 tackles the last 3 years. Maybe Alex Rake is going to play in that rotation as well. So we will see what happens at the linebacker position. But you feel pretty good about the experience. But again, you have to find ways to be disruptive. You have to find ways to step up and be productive and get to the ball carrier because this is a group that the secondary feels like they're in good hands, but they can't do everything. They are not going to be able to get to the ball carrier in the backfield on a consistent basis. That is not their job. It is the front seven's job to get to those guys, and you have to find ways to be special at times and also be disruptive because if you can do that, you feel pretty good about what this group can do on the back end. This is a group that knows how to get the football back to your offense. They have proven that time and time again. It's just a matter of putting that quarterback in difficult situations where you give your cornerbacks and your safeties more opportunities to make those kinds of plays. And everybody's talking about the corners. It's pretty obvious why they're talking about Kobe Bryant and Mello Dotson come back for yet another year of college football and another year to showcase why they are two of the better corners in the entire country. These are guys who know what to do when the football is in the air, and these are all conference type players that are going to set the tone for this defense. And when you look at this defense, you have lots of upperclassmen that are playing. In fact, every single starter will be a junior or a senior for now. And you have plenty of juniors and seniors on the back end. So this is an experienced group who've probably been here for a little while and knows what is expected of them. Now, what happens if one of them goes down? Maybe a guy like Demarius McGee steps up, but again, junior. Maybe Jalen Todd is one of those guys. If Mello Dotson goes down, who do you have to replace him? You could look to Brian Dilworth, who's a sophomore, Jameel Croft, who's a redshirt freshman. So now you're starting to get into some of those younger players, but you feel pretty good about what Dotson and Brian can do. So you don't really expect to see those younger guys unless an injury comes into play. The safety position is really no different. OJ Burrows and Marvin Grant are back after successful years. Maybe not as good as Dotson and Bryant, but still two solid players that know what they're doing. Devin Dye goes into that rotation. We talked about him earlier from Utah State. Maybe a redshirt freshman like Taylor Davis will come into the rotation as well. You could see Jalen Dye as well and Mason Ellis. So you have some pretty solid depth pieces at the safety position. So it's just a matter of keeping guys healthy and then maybe even getting players in position to make plays that maybe didn't play as big of roles last year or didn't play any role at all. So this is a group that has talent on the back end. You probably just maybe have more questions about the group up front, but if they're able to put things together and they have the culture that they do, you feel pretty good about their ability to potentially play as a solid unit and get to where you need to be. Because Kansas, especially in this new Big 12, it feels like there's a lot of teams that are surpassing them as this season grows nearer. And it's just a matter of can Kansas play to the level that they know they're capable of playing? Because when you look at the schedule, there's plenty of opportunities for wins. That is not really a question. And the first few games allow you some time to get acclimated, but also there's a couple of opportunities for upsets if they're not able to figure things out. The first game, obviously, is not really too concerning. Lindenwood is coming to town, and they should not put up too much of a fight, if at all. So that should be a game that Kansas feels pretty good when they start the season. Then you travel to Illinois. That is going to be an interesting game. They haven't played since 1968, and this is obviously very different in terms of where Kansas and Illinois are at. Illinois is looking to bounce back after a tough year and find a way to upset Kansas could be a great way to jumpstart that season. UNLV is up next. That is a group of five team that is looking to get back to the top of the Mountain West, and they are going to be really fun to watch. This is obviously a very fun game because they played last year in the Guaranteed Rate Bowl. Kansas led 28-7 in the second quarter, but UNLV cut it to 28-24 until Kansas ultimately pulled away and hung on for a win. So that's also another factor of that. You get a little bit of a revenge factor. Then you travel to West Virginia. Traveling to West Virginia is a very underrated place to play because that is so difficult on the road. TCU comes to town after that, and then you go to Arizona State. So that is a new matchup that you didn't see in the last obviously handful of years or really for a while. It's their first actual meeting between those two teams, but I'm saying the Pac-12, you get different matchups that you didn't necessarily see. Then you get a week off before you face Houston. So that's going to be an interesting game. Will Houston be better under Willie Fritz? We don't really know, but we will find out pretty quick and we will know by the time they play on October 19th. Then you travel to Kansas State. Obviously, that's going to be difficult, not only because it's a rivalry game, but also because Kansas State is one of those teams that is competing for a conference championship. Then you get a week off before you host Iowa State. I like hosting Iowa State over going to Ames. That's another difficult place to play. At BYU could be interesting. That's the third all-time meeting for them. But going to BYU could be a difficult trip. That is a team that I'm not really sure what to think about quite yet, but we will find out soon enough. Hosting Colorado at home, who knows what Colorado will be at that point. If they are playing really well, that's going to be tough. But if they are imploding like they did last year, then you feel pretty good about Kansas' chances. Again, a lot of that stems into Jalen Daniels' health and what he is capable of doing. Then you go to Baylor. That's a tough way to end the year. That is a tough game to finish your season on. But again, when you're looking at that schedule, you feel pretty good about what you can do in terms of winnable games. That is going to be the biggest thing is how many games can you win with that schedule? Because again, certain questions dictate how successful you're going to be. But at the same time, you also probably have some concerns that will change things. If Jalen Daniels gets hurt, that severely affects the over under, the number of games that you can win. Now, I will say every single one of these games is a winnable game for Kansas when you look at it at face value. I don't think that there's a team that I don't think Kansas can beat. But when you look at it closely, Illinois is a tough trip. That could be a team that's much better and gives Kansas some trouble. UNLV is playing with some revenge. They already showed that they can compete with Kansas, especially if that defense isn't ready yet. At West Virginia, that is a tough game. TCU at home, TCU could be much better. At Kansas State is obvious. Iowa State could be a contender this year. Colorado is going to be very interesting. So there's definitely plenty of wins, but there's also plenty of opportunities to unfortunately lose football games. So we will see what Kansas does. But again, it's Lance Leipold running the show. So if they won 8, maybe 9 games, it wouldn't be surprised. But also, if things don't go so well, you could also see, a 6-6 season. I'll probably give them that elevated floor of a bowl game where that's their minimum, just because I trust what Leipold is trying to do. Now, that obviously could be different, but we will see what happens with this team. If Jalen Daniels stays healthy, you feel really good about where this team can go. If he's not healthy, that raises some more questions. That gives this team an opportunity to embrace some adversity. And if there's one team that can handle that kind of adversity, it's a team that's led by Lance Leipold.